Welcome back to SpaceX Daily, episode 34. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Today is July 16th, 2026. Here's what's happening at SpaceX today. Closing the Flight 12 Mishap probe removes the last regulatory hold on Starship's engine-relight demonstration that directly gates Artemis III lander timelines. Remember, we covered the Starship flight test campaign yesterday. This closure moves the refueling timeline forward by removing the final external constraint. The Federal Aviation Administration has formally closed its investigation into the Flight 12 anomaly. The agency released the vehicle and booster for the next test campaign without additional corrective actions. This decision removes the final external constraint on the engine relight sequence planned for Flight 13. The relight demonstration remains the critical gate for proving orbital refueling capability ahead of Artemis III. The next static fire window at Starbase will confirm Raptor ignition reliability under the updated propellant conditioning procedures. The closure follows detailed review of telemetry from the prior flight's performance data, with no new hardware modifications mandated. With the regulatory path now open, the real engineering challenge is the fluid dynamics problem the relight itself must solve. The engine relight sequence planned for Starship Flight 13 must solve a fundamental fluid dynamics problem of restarting a cryogenic Raptor in the vacuum of space after the vehicle has coasted for tens of minutes. In microgravity, the remaining liquid oxygen and methane stratify inside the tanks, leaving vapor pockets at the feed lines. Without active settling thrust or a dedicated ullage motor, the turbopumps risk ingesting gas and cavitating on ignition. SpaceX's approach uses a short RCS burn to settle the propellants, followed by a carefully timed helium purge that clears the lines before the igniter fires. The energy cost of that settling burn directly reduces the payload margin available for the first orbital refueling demonstration. If the relight succeeds, the same settling technique becomes the baseline for every subsequent tanker flight, collapsing the propellant transfer timeline from days to hours. The raw propellants themselves are cheap, yet the entire mission architecture hinges on whether a few kilograms of helium and RCS impulse can guarantee liquid at the pump inlet. A single failed relight forces either a heavier settling system or a redesign of the tank geometry, both of which multiply the per-flight cost far beyond the price of the fuel. Success on Flight 13 would validate the settling sequence under real orbital conditions and directly inform the refueling demonstrations required for Artemis III. SpaceX has registered the name StarMind for its planned constellation of orbital AI inference satellites. The architecture pairs Starlink laser links with onboard accelerators to deliver low-latency compute to terrestrial users. Early filings indicate the first demonstration nodes will ride on Starship once refueling is proven. The program directly extends the same inter-satellite networking already flying on the Starlink fleet. Initial nodes will test inference workloads routed through the existing laser mesh. This naming formalizes the orbital compute thread within the broader Starlink expansion. The V5 user terminal introduces a smaller phased array aperture and integrated laser link transceiver that raises downlink capacity while cutting power draw by roughly 15%. Production units are already shipping to select maritime and aviation customers for field validation. The design change supports the direct-to-cell waveform without requiring a separate modem. Next milestone is regulatory approval for the V5 terminal in additional countries. The terminal maintains compatibility with existing Starlink ground infrastructure. Field tests will measure link stability under motion and weather conditions typical for those customer segments. The Air Force has begun installing Starshield flat panel antennas on KC-135 tankers to provide resilient, beyond line-of-sight communications during refueling operations. Each aircraft receives two terminals that maintain links through the Starshield constellation even when traditional UHF SATCOM is jammed. The retrofit uses existing fuselage hardpoints and adds minimal drag. Operational testing is scheduled for later this quarter. The antennas leverage the same phased array technology already proven on Starlink platforms. This integration extends Starshield's role in national security communications without requiring new airframe modifications. Regulatory filings show SpaceX has completed the final spectrum coordination steps required for Starlink service in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. Ground stations are already under construction near Erbil. Service launch is expected within 90 days once the final operating license is issued. The rollout adds another high-demand market to the direct-to-cell expansion timeline. Coordination covered both Q and Ka band allocations for the regional beams. Local partners are preparing distribution channels ahead of commercial availability. Amazon has received regulatory clearance to begin beta service for its Project Kuis constellation in South Africa. Starlink's own license application remains under review by the same authority. The parallel rollout gives regulators a direct comparison of two LEO systems in the same market. Starlink's license decision is expected before year-end. Both operators have proposed similar ground segment architectures for the region. The outcome will set precedent for additional African market entries. A small fire was reported at the propellant gasification test stand on the Starbase production site. Local fire crews responded and contained the incident with no injuries. The stand supports Raptor engine pre-burner testing ahead of the next flight campaign. Operations at adjacent pads continued uninterrupted. The event occurred during routine conditioning of cryogenic propellants. Investigation into the cause is underway but has not altered the overall test schedule. Observers on X are sharing high-resolution photos of the Ship 39 heat shield tile layout, taken during recent stacking operations at Starbase. The pattern shows a denser tile arrangement near the leeward side compared with Flight 12. Separate posts note that the Mechazilla tower arms have been fitted with new capture fixtures ahead of the upcoming test. A third thread tracks the first public sighting of a V5 Starlink terminal installed on a commercial vessel in the Gulf of Mexico. Worth keeping an eye on, Starlink satellites are now executing nearly one collision avoidance maneuver per week on average, according to tracking data and regulatory filings. The rising frequency consumes propellant reserves and shortens on-orbit lifetime. Continued growth in both the Starlink constellation and other LEO traffic will increase the maneuver burden unless improved coordination or debris mitigation rules are adopted. Resolution depends on either new international traffic management agreements or hardware upgrades that reduce propellant cost per maneuver. On the AI front, SpaceX has formally named its planned orbital AI inference constellation StarMind, pairing Starlink laser links with onboard accelerators for low-latency terrestrial compute. The first nodes are slated to ride on Starship once refueling is demonstrated. xAI's Colossus II project in Mississippi continues to draw scrutiny over air quality permitting for its 59 installed gas turbines. Cursor vulnerability researchers have published additional exploit details that remain unpatched 7 months after initial disclosure. The StarMind architecture reuses the intersatellite laser network already operating on Starlink satellites. Early demonstration flights will validate power and thermal management for the onboard accelerators under orbital conditions. From an engineering standpoint, the engine-relight sequence planned for Starship Flight 13 must solve a fundamental fluid dynamics problem of restarting a cryogenic Raptor in the vacuum of space after the vehicle has coasted for tens of minutes. In microgravity, the remaining liquid oxygen and methane stratify inside the tanks, leaving vapor pockets at the feed lines. Without active settling thrust or a dedicated ullage motor, the turbopumps risk ingesting gas and cavitating on ignition. SpaceX's approach uses a short RCS burn to settle the propellants, followed by a carefully timed helium purge that clears the lines before the igniter fires. The energy cost of that settling burn directly reduces the payload margin available for the first orbital refueling demonstration. If the relight succeeds, the same settling technique becomes the baseline for every subsequent tanker flight, collapsing the propellant transfer timeline from days to hours. The raw propellants themselves are cheap, yet the entire mission architecture hinges on whether a few kilograms of helium and RCS impulse can guarantee liquid at the pump inlet. A single failed relight forces either a heavier settling system or a redesign of the tank geometry, both of which multiply the per-flight cost far beyond the price of the fuel. The idiot index here is instructive because the finished capability of reliable vacuum restart costs orders of magnitude more than the propellant inputs alone. Success on Flight 13 would validate the settling sequence under real orbital conditions and directly inform the refueling demonstrations required for Artemis III. Engineers will monitor tank pressure decay rates and igniter performance across multiple attempts to build statistical confidence. Any deviation in helium consumption or RCS propellant use will be tracked against pre-flight models to refine future vehicle mass budgets. The outcome determines whether Starship can transition from suborbital hops to sustained orbital operations within the current architecture. And a quick market note, SPCX closed at $135.27, down 0.4%. Before we go, Starship's next engine-relight test now sits one regulatory step closer, and that's a wrap on today's SpaceX developments. SPCX is trading at $135.27, down 0.4%. Share this with a fellow spaceflight fan if you found it useful, and subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you next time. And before you go, this show is part of the NARA Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets. Each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. Models and Agents for Beginners. Artificial Intelligence Explained Simply for Beginners and Curious Teens. Find every show free at naranetwork.com. And on the website, every episode's visuals live in our free image gallery at naranetwork.com/gallery. Royalty-free under Creative Commons, download with attribution. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.